In episode 42 of Words with Wentz, we documented how the evening news died. The FCC rule that once required balance, repealed in 1987. The Telecom Act that let 5 companies buy the anchor desks. The SEC filings that show exactly who owns them today. That episode ended with a question. If the institution of the evening news has been hollowed out, if 5 parent companies control 5 national news desks, and 2 of them are now merging, what fills the gap? Tonight, we look at the answer that tens of millions of Americans have already chosen: podcasts, independent creators, and social media news. According to Edison Research's Infinite Dial report, approximately 135 million Americans listen to podcasts monthly as of 2025. That is not a niche format. That is a mainstream information channel that did not exist in the era of Walter Cronkite and has grown to rival broadcast television audiences in the years since. Some independent creators now reach audiences that match or exceed major cable news programs, without a broadcast license, without a network parent, without a regulatory framework designed for them. Tonight on Words with Wentz, we are going to look at that honestly, the genuine benefits, the documented concerns, and the one question that matters more than whether podcasts are better than television news. If you watched episode 42 first, good. This episode picks up exactly where that one left off. If you haven't, the link is in the description. Start there. The case for podcasts and independent media is genuine, and it deserves to be stated clearly before the concerns. Convenience first. Unlike a television schedule, podcasts travel with you. Listeners consume them while driving, exercising, cooking, or commuting. That accessibility has opened news and commentary to people who would not sit down for a traditional broadcast, and it has dramatically expanded the amount of time people spend with in-depth information. Long-form conversation is the format's most significant advantage. A 30-second television news clip cannot give a scientist the time to explain a complex study. It cannot give an author the space to trace an argument. It cannot give a historian the room to provide context. A 2-hour podcast conversation can do all of those things, and frequently does. Independent creators have hosted in-depth conversations with scientists, economists, military historians, investigative journalists, foreign policy analysts, and public officials, conversations that could not exist within the constraints of traditional broadcast formats. The direct relationship between creator and audience is also genuinely valuable. Without a network parent between them, independent creators can cover stories that large media organizations may avoid, whether because of advertising relationships, editorial caution, or simple bandwidth. Stories that fall outside the priorities of a 5-company consolidation can find an audience through an independent creator with a microphone and an internet connection. The First Amendment protects that creator as fully as it protects the New York Times. That protection is real and it matters. These are the genuine benefits. They are documented in the audience data and in the content itself, and they explain why tens of millions of Americans have made this format their primary news source. The benefits are real. So are the concerns, and as a paralegal who reads documents, I want to be precise about what those concerns actually are. Editorial standards. Traditional newsrooms, the ones we documented in episode 42, employ editors, fact-checkers, and correction policies. Those systems are imperfect, and the episode documented their failures, but they exist. A reporter at a professional news organization who publishes an unsupported claim has a mechanism of accountability. An editor, a corrections policy, a public record of error. Most independent creators do not operate under those constraints. That is not inherently a criticism. It is a structural fact. An independent podcaster is responsible for their own research, their own sourcing, and their own corrections. When a creator with millions of listeners publishes an unsupported claim, the correction mechanism is whatever that creator chooses to do. Some creators hold themselves to rigorous standards, some do not. The audience cannot always tell the difference from the outside. The algorithm concern is documented and significant. Social media platforms recommend content based on previous viewing habits. That recommendation system is designed to maximize engagement. And engagement is highest when content confirms what people already believe or provokes a strong emotional response. The result, documented by researchers, is that recommendation algorithms can create information environments where people are consistently exposed to perspectives that reinforce their existing views and rarely encounter well-sourced challenges to them. The platform is not neutral, it has a business model, and that business model shapes what you see. We documented this in detail in episode 15, The Invisible Market, and in episode 18. The algorithm that shapes your podcast feed is the same infrastructure we covered there. And the FTC's endorsement guidelines, 16 C.F.R. Part 255, require material disclosure when a financial relationship exists between a creator and a sponsor. Those requirements apply to every podcaster and influencer operating in the United States. Whether they are consistently followed is a documented question. Before you trust a recommendation from an independent creator, it is entirely reasonable to ask, is this sponsor-driven content, and was that disclosed? There is a narrative in independent media circles that traditional journalism is finished, that it has been captured by corporate interests, that it cannot be trusted, that podcasts and independent creators are the only honest sources left. That narrative overstates the case, and I want to say why, because the honest answer requires holding both things at once. Investigative reporting, the kind that uncovers government corruption, follows financial fraud, documents systemic abuse, requires significant resources. It requires journalists who spend months on a single story. It requires lawyers to review publication for legal exposure. It requires editors who can push back on a reporter's conclusions when the evidence does not support them. It requires institutional memory, reporters who have covered an agency for 15 years and know where the bodies are buried. Independent podcasts, for all their genuine strengths, rarely produce this kind of original investigative journalism. What they do, frequently and effectively, is discuss, interpret, and amplify reporting that professional journalists produced first. That is a legitimate and valuable function. Reaching an audience of millions with reporting that might have been read by thousands is a genuine public service. But it is a different function than original investigation. And when the investigative infrastructure weakens, when local newspapers close, when investigative teams are cut, when FOIA requests go unfiled because no one has the resources to follow up, the independent creator has less original reporting to amplify. The two forms of media are not simply substitutes for each other. They are most powerful when they work in combination. Professional journalism producing original documented reporting, independent creators reaching audiences that professional outlets cannot. The question is not which one to trust. The question is what each does well and what each requires from you as a reader. Here is what all of this adds up to, something practical you can use tonight. The era of one trusted anchor delivering the authoritative version of events is over. That is not coming back. What has replaced it is a landscape in which you are surrounded by information from dozens of sources, some professional, some independent, some sponsored, some algorithmically selected, and you are largely on your own to evaluate it. That is not necessarily a bad thing. It is a different skill, and it is one that can be learned. 4 questions. Ask them about every source: television, podcast, social media feed, or newspaper. First, who made this? Not just the creator's name? Who funds them? Do they have sponsors whose interests might shape their coverage? Is there a disclosure? Is the disclosure prominent or buried? Second, what evidence supports the claim? Not the creator's confidence, not the tone of certainty. What is the documented source? Can you find the primary document they are describing? We have talked about SEC Edgar, FCC records, FOIA, and Congress.gov in this series. These are free tools that let you check the underlying source for almost any major claim about government or corporate conduct. Third, do other sources agree? Not just sources that share the same perspective, sources with different starting points that arrived at the same documented conclusion. If only one creator is reporting something significant, that is not automatically evidence that they are brave and everyone else is covering it up. It may be evidence that the claim has not been verified. Fourth, is opinion clearly labeled as opinion? As we documented in episode 42, Pew Research found that only about 1 in 4 Americans could correctly identify opinion statements in news content. The format signals matter. If a podcast host is giving you their interpretation of events, that is a different thing than documented reporting. Both have value. Only one of them is a primary source. These 4 questions do not require a journalism degree. They require the same habits a paralegal uses every single day. Find the document, check the source, verify the claim, and ask who benefits from you believing it. The growth of podcasts has permanently changed the way people receive news and information. That change is not reversible. And honestly, it should not be, because the genuine benefits are real and the audiences being reached are real. But here is the question the essay that inspired this episode asked, and it is the right question to close with. As information becomes easier to access than ever before, are we becoming better at deciding what is actually true? The honest answer is not automatically. Access to more information does not produce better judgment about information. It can just as easily produce more confident wrong conclusions, more deeply held misinformation, and more entrenched division if the information is not being evaluated. The 4 questions I gave you in the last segment are the beginning of an answer. The habit of going to the primary source, checking SEC Edgar before you trust an ownership narrative, reading the FCC docket before you accept that a rule never existed, pulling up the bill text on Congress.gov before you share a summary. That habit is an answer. Independent creators can be extraordinary. They can reach audiences that traditional journalism cannot. They can cover stories that corporate media avoids. They can restore a direct relationship between a journalist and an audience that the consolidation of 5 parent companies has disrupted. And they can also be wrong, sponsored, algorithmically amplified, and unaccountable to anyone but their subscriber count. The difference between those 2 versions of independent media is not the format. It is not the platform. It is not the follower count. It is whether you, the person listening, are asking the right questions. The documents are in the description. This is Words with Wentz. Know your rights.
Let the signal cut through the noise. Reading between the lines. Every story leaves a trace, unlocking time and space, finding truth with Wentz.